Do you still think that ECA is very relevant on the continent?
ECA remains as relevant as it was in 1958 as now. A lot of youth, yes, don't understand. But a lot of Ethiopians also don't know the part they played. Right? You know the flag of Ethiopia: green, yellow, or gold, and then red. So when we got our independence, Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah was so innovative. It's a joke. He just turned the Ethiopian flag upside down, right? Rotated it 180 degrees. And what happened? You have the red up, the gold in the middle, and the green down, and then he stamped it with the black star. And that's how Ghana flag was born.
Today, you go to many of our schools, we learn about the Queen of England, we learn about foreign things. Now, this thing you are talking right now, many, I can tell you for a fact, that there maybe 90% of African young people have no clue. Why are we losing our history?
Well, I wouldn't say even only the youth, but you could also even say that even the old, a lot of people don't know that history because we don't want to tell it.
A lot of the things we read about our own country, most of them are written by foreigners who had their own private interests and what have you. So where are we getting it wrong?
We are not comfortable to tell our stories. The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it's linked to the total liberation of the continent.
Once again, let me welcome you to the Religion and Enterprise television, where we discuss the role of faith-based institutions in promoting small and medium-scale enterprises on the continent. And today we are privileged to be talking to a very good friend of mine, my own brother, who has spent almost 2 decades in this process. And I'm talking about my good friend, Dr. Joseph Attah-Mensah, who on the 24th of July, the year 2023, gave a very interesting lecture looking at the question, is Africa integrating or disintegrating? As you know, a prelude to his retirement. And it was fascinating. And today we have caught up with him in Addis Ababa, here in Ethiopia, to be delving much deeper into some of the issues that he raised during the lecture. And so it's an honor to have you, my brother Joe. And congratulations for the number of years that you've spent with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and that interesting lecture that you gave on the 24th of July. Congratulations once again.
Thank you very much.
Interesting. Joe, let me start off by asking you, how has it been with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa for all these almost 2 decades?
Well, let me start first by thanking you for doing what you do, for thanking you for your friendship, and for the many things that you do with your work.
Yes.
Now, what I always believe in is that your work, which is on how to use the faith-based institutions to champion development, is very important.
Thank you.
In your own way, you contribute to the socioeconomic development of our continent. And why do I say that in brief? Every Friday, people go to the mosque. Saturdays, for those who are SDA, go to the church. I know many people, Christians, go to church on Sundays. What is development? Who are the actors of development? It's the people. How do you reach these people to understand what they are doing? Is so important. It's true, getting to Sunday schools and getting the faith-based institutions to also convince the people. At the same time, the institutions themselves may decide that they might want to also venture into development. So thank you for what you do.
Very much welcome.
How has it been so far? The journey has been interesting. You know, each and every one of us, we have valleys, which is when we go down, and we have triumphs when we're on top of the mountain. I would say that my valleys, or the going down, or frustration, has been less than the triumphs. And so we have to give gratitude. And it's been an interesting journey. And the question is, you talked about the seminar. You know, we all aspire to be somebody, right?
Yes.
And so when you have people who you aspire to be them because of the work they've done, and for them to come and tell you what they said about you, about me, during the seminar, I don't know where it goes from here. It's very humbling, and I'm still deeply touched by their kind words and words of generosity. And for some of them, even called me in the morning to let me know that
You're going to be online.
no, they called me the day after to let me know that it's not that they said it, but they came from their heart and thanked me again for the work that I've done on the continent.
No, but Joe, I'm not surprised because, I mean, knowing you for all these years that I've known you, I'm not surprised that you had the likes of Ibi Chambers, Dr. Muakon, and all these high-profile individuals talking about you the way they did. Because, I mean, you're an incredible human being. And so let me join them again to say congratulations.
No, I'm not perfect.
Oh, I don't think we're talking about morality.
I have a lot of rough edges.
No, but Joe, I mean, seriously speaking, I mean, I remember very well when we hosted you and His Excellency Abdullah in Ghana. You know, youth did this thing in partnership with the ECA, and you know, everybody was talking about you guys. You know, you and His Excellency, and so I am not surprised that these guys spoke about you the way they did. You know, but let me ask the question, Joe. You know, for many people, when you hear the Economic Commission for Africa, you'll be surprised that many young Africans don't even know what ECA does. So having spent almost 2 decades with ECA, could you please tell us exactly what is the role of ECA on the continent?
Well, thanks for the question. ECA was created in 1958 by the UN General Assembly, ECOSOC, or Economic and Social Commission. Now, its mandate was to support the socioeconomic development of its member states. And through that, ECA supported those involved in the creation of the Organization of African Unity, OAU. ECA supported the creation of the African Development Bank. ECA was there in terms of economic development when something known as the Lagos Plan of Action was given birth to, which gave a blueprint for development of the continent. ECA was there when the Abuja Treaty, which is also a blueprint of the Organization of African Unity, to give a guidance on how we were going to have economic integration. ECA was there, you know, with the formation of the regional economic communities. So all in all, ECA has done quite a bit supporting member states. As you said, we came to support you, which is Ghana, on the youth, on the regional side. So we continue to engage, we continue to be involved. And this leads into when I was giving the discussions on the history of the evolution of regional integration in Africa. We always want people to understand, and that is what particularly a lot of youth, yes, don't understand, but a lot of Ethiopians also don't know the part they played. So when it comes to regional integration, at the time when we started this work of regional integration, it was with Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, standing on the polo court in Ghana and saying the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it's linked to the total liberation of the continent. You might say it's mere words, but it was a powerful statement to say that, look, yes, we've gotten our independence in 1957, 6 March 1957, but it means nothing to him if other African countries are under colonial domination. So the point is that he feels that Ghana's independence should be a torchbearer for that. But right at that time...
No, before you go there, we will come to I want us to come to the evolution of the African integration proper. But before we do that, let me ask this question before we so we can zoom there. So looking at all the changes that are taking place globally, with now the polar global politics or economics that we see, with China coming onto the stage, do you still think that ECA is very relevant on the continent?
Well, it's a good question. Yes, we live in a multipolar world. That is true. But ECA remains as relevant as it was in 1958 as now. Because, our member states face a number of economic challenges and some political challenges too, particularly the issue of governance. And we have to find a way that we have to continue to provide technical support to our member states. ECA, how does it deliver its work? ECA delivers its work through 3 main areas. What you would call advocacy, where we advocate and help African countries to have a common position or take a position on an issue. Where countries have limited capacity or capacity gaps, ECA tends to fill it up through capacity building, or what we talk about as technical assistance and advisory services. So we come to the country, we work with them on particular issue that they are faced with, and we're trying to address. Right. And then the third thing that we do very well with ECA is what we call the power of convening. Okay. So we are able to convene ministers, we're able to convene intellectuals, we're able to convene meetings where a particular issue, we try to bring those concerns to have a dialogue, and through this dialogue, we come to a common position. So it is so relevant because the challenges Africa faces, at the moment, it faces a triple, or what do we call a trinity challenge. And the trinity challenge are 3. 1, the issue of sustainable development, where we've had anemic growth and all that, which we need to address. We also face the issue of climate change, and we also face the issue of the impact of the war in Ukraine. And of course, before then, we had the sustainable development in terms of COVID, right? So you have these 3 shocks. And because of COVID, and this is what is not told, and I'm surprised that people don't use that as in Ghana alone. Nobody knew what COVID was about when it started. We felt it started like everybody thinking that it's just a cold, a common cold. And then all of a sudden, we begin to experience people dying. So the question is, what should governments do? Governments had no choice but to go and borrow. And that is why most of African, because they borrowed to save lives. They borrowed to buy the personal protection equipments. They borrowed to buy oxygens. They borrowed to buy, health vaccines and all that. So that's why African countries are saddled with this massive debt. Of course, there were governance issues involving the disbursement of the COVID funds, but we can investigate that. But generally, that's why we have debts. And so your question about ECA, its relevance, it is still relevant, because how are these countries going to deal with the challenges that they face? They have to understand, they have to marshal the data, and through the data, they have to do the analysis required, and from the analysis, they can provide prescriptions that are needed. It's like being a patient to a doctor. So it is relevant. It was relevant in 1958. It is relevant today.
Interesting. I mean, during your lecture, your seminar, it was very obvious that, you provided such an illuminating history about the evolution of the integration of the continent. And I want you to take your time and walk us through I'm asking this question because now, as we all know, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area has become a major policy for the continent, which we all agree is the best way to go. It is almost like concretizing the ideals of our independent forefathers, which is now becoming almost like a reality. But most of us, most Africans, especially the younger generation, are not very conversant with how it all started. Could you please walk us through the genesis of this whole, because for many people, they think integration started just with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which we are talking about now. And from your lecture, it was obvious that you were there, you've seen it, and you have actually participated to the extent that even setting up the secretariat in Ghana, you were very instrumental in these things. Would you walk us through the genesis of this whole integration of Africa? And by the time we are finishing this program, my last question to you would be, is Africa indeed integrating or disintegrating? We'll come to that. But walk us through the genesis of this whole process.
Well, Emmanuel, thanks for the question again. As I said, in 1957, March 6, Ghana gained its independence. There was a lot of jubilation, a lot of celebration. And Nkrumah stood on the podium around where he's been laid to rest in Ghana. And he said, the independence of Ghana, it is meaningless unless it's linked to the total liberation of the continent. Because at the time Ghana gained its independence, most of African countries were under oppression. And he felt that the black man or the African was capable of taking care of its own affairs. It will fail, it will make some wrongs, but it's capable to learn from its mistakes in order to build. So therefore, Africa needed that. Now, around the same time, some countries, 3 years after 57, some countries got their independence. And so by 63, about 33 countries had gained their independence. Now, however, there were two factions. Kwame Nkrumah had the spirit of Pan-Africanism because he was there in 1945 when the Manchester meeting took place. on all African Congress. And then in 1958, he organized the African People's Congress in Accra. And it's all towards Pan-Africanism. But they had come out with two blocks. One was the Casablanca bloc, which wanted independence now, quicker. And there was the Monrovia bloc. And the Monrovia bloc wanted a gradualist approach and an independence within the boundaries of what their boundaries. But the traditional boundaries. But Kwame Nkrumah's idea, the Casablanca bloc, wanted to erase the borders, what existed before a group of people sat in Berlin and decided that, and partitioned Africa, and said, this is Ghana, this is Burkina Faso, this is Southern Africa, this is this. But the question we have to understand, by the way, this country where we are beaming this interview was never colonized.
Which is Addis-Ababa.
Ethiopia was never colonized. And therefore, Emperor Haile Selassie, was then the sort of head of state.
Right.
A number of African countries drew their inspiration from this country.
Right.
And the young people here don't even know that. The contribution of Ethiopia
To the African
to the liberation.
Right.
Nelson Mandela was here.
Interesting.
Right? And you have a situation where a number of Africans, including those who later became presidents of their country, going to University of Addis Ababa. Nobody tells that story. Right? Nobody tells that story. So there were these two blocks, the Casablanca bloc, the Moravian bloc. So Emperor Haile Selassie had been invited by the Moravian bloc for a meeting. I don't know whether it was in Moravia or I don't know exactly. But the emperor felt strongly that he shouldn't go, but rather he should find a way to bring these two factions together. So he had a very astute foreign minister called Ketema Yifru. Okay? And I wish the Ethiopians would know. And he was doing shuttle diplomacy to capitals to try and see how we can bring these people. And Nkrumah was an ally, a very good friend of Haile Selassie. Very good friend, like a brother. And then you have Gamal Nasser of Egypt, a very good brother. You have Jomo Kenyatta, a very good brother. And all these people were there. And I always say that I wish I lived at that time. You know, and what do you call it? Haile Selassie and through his minister was able to bring these people together. The 33 countries that were independent, plus those who were waging their struggle. To Addis Ababa.
Right.
They stayed at the Gion Hotel.
All of them?
All of them were at the Gion Hotel because there was a passage from the Gion Hotel to go to the palace where Haile Selassie was. But the meeting itself was at the ECA. There's a place where it's called the Africa Hall, which is now being renovated to bring it back to form. Now, you know the flag of Ethiopia, right? You know the flag of Ethiopia. Green, yellow, or gold, and then red. So when we got our independence, Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah was so innovative. It's a joke. He just turned the Ethiopian flag upside down, right? Rotated it 180 degrees. And what happened? You have the red up, the gold in the middle, and the green down, and then he stamped it with the black star. And that's how Ghana flag was born. Right? Now, if you go around and you look at countries, particularly the West, 14 countries use red, gold, green. The shape might be different. What is in the middle is, but it's all from the inspiration of this country. This country, right? So when we talk about why we are one, it is because we are one. And we owe a lot, not only to Kwame Nkrumah, but we owe a lot to Haile Selassie for making sure, because don't forget that in terms of the League of Nations that gave birth to the UN, the United Nations, Ethiopia was a member when that meeting was held in San Francisco. Right? So I think, you see, it's just that we are in the times that Ethiopia may be going through struggles. But this country inspired a lot of African countries for their independence. And I think it needs to be told.
Absolutely.
So the two factions, I've gone in circles, but the Moravia and Casablanca came together and they formed the African Unity. I'm told, I don't know for a fact, but I'm told that the charter, the Haile Selassie emperor, made sure that he got all the countries. There was a little bit of, challenges and all that, but he made sure he got everyone to sign the charter, the OAU, the Organization of African Unity. So, that is the story,
Listen, if you have just joined us, we are right here in Addis Ababa talking to my very good friend, a brother, Dr. Joseph Attah-Mensah. And this interview is a follow-up to a very illuminating lecture that he gave, seminar that he gave on the 24th of July regarding whether Africa is integrating or disintegrating. And today we are trying to look at the genesis of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which has become one of the major, I call it the hope for Africa, the promising hope of Africa, because that's really, policy or pillar right now that's going to bring the entire continent under one economic entity. And we are talking to my brother, Dr. Joseph Attah-Mensah. This is the Religion and Enterprise Television. And if you have just joined us, this is the platform where we discuss the role of faith-based institutions in promoting small and medium-scale enterprises on the continent, particularly making sure that they become active actors in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And that is why we are talking to Dr. Joseph Attah-Mensah about the whole genesis of the Africa Continental Free Trade, or the integration of the continent. Joe, this is very, very interesting. Now, we will go back to the genesis, but you mentioned something which is very, very scary for me. Look at the history that you have given us. Today, you go to many of our schools, we learn about the Queen of England, we learn about foreign things. Now, this thing you are talking right now, I can tell you for a fact that there maybe 90% of African young people have no clue. Why are we losing our history?
Because I wouldn't say even only the youth, but you could also even say that even the old, a lot of people don't know that history. Because we don't want to tell it.
Is it that?
Because
Is it documented?
I'm sure. One of my aim and my aspiration would be if I could get the opportunity to go into the vaults of the ministries of foreign affairs of all these governments to see the communication that existed, particularly in this country, to read them, if I can have access to them. I don't know if I can. And then we start to document and write about them. Because I would want to go back to write this history, the history of this country.
Because I'm asking that because if you look at the history of Africa, even our own country, Ghana, by the way, both of us are from Ghana, a lot of the things we read about our own country, most of them are written by foreigners. who had their own, private interest and what have you. So where are we getting it wrong?
Well, we're getting it wrong because the fact that we are not, we don't, I don't even know how to put it. We are not comfortable to tell our stories. Because put it this way, we feel that everything in the West is good. And everything in our area. Like if you know very well that, like us, if you put on your cloth, they'll tell you that you are a bush person, right? They want you to dress properly.
Even eat with your hands.
Yeah, it's not acceptable, right? So there are things that we are not telling. We are not telling our stories, Even here in Ethiopia, when I take a taxi and you tell somebody, a taxi driver, take me to ECA or take me to AU, they'll drive you there, right? They'll take you to AU. But when you ask them, what do they do at AU? Or what does ECA do? The AU, they'll tell you, well, we don't know what they do, but what we do know is that around January, February, heads of states will come into town. They will close the roads for 3 days we can't get anywhere. And then it's very important, right? That we tell the stories. And maybe in terms of as I move into another phase, I think these are some of the things I would like to research on, to get more of my facts correct on many areas, to understand how the OAU was born, where, and particularly the actors. And through that lens, we can see how we can project into the future.
No, I think this is very, very important because particularly now that we are talking about Agenda 2063, and we are also talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, I think it's important that we begin to tell the story from the African perspective. And so maybe another time we shall discuss it because...
Well, let me tell you.
We always think that the free trade area is something that came now. We see the Agenda 2063 as something that came now.
Right.
Yes, I give credit to Madam Zuma,
right,
who was then the chairperson of the African Union, who pioneered the Agenda 2063.
Right.
I give her full credit for that.
right.
But if you look at the contents of what the flagship projects and all that, this is a continuum
Absolutely.
of the past.
Right.
From the Lagos Plan of Action through the Abuja Treaty to now.
Right.
And most of the things that is in that, and again, I'm being biased, and I stand to be crucified for this, but it's because of Nkrumah's Africa Must Unite.
Interesting.
Right? It's Nkrumah's Africa Must Unite that talked about one common currency. Right? It's Nkrumah's Africa Must Unite that talked about the need that we have to harmonize our foreign policy.
Okay.
So it is something that everything that we are here today is a continuum.
I see.
It is not new.
So Joe, then, this point you have this point you have made, let me ask a question. Everybody agrees that the pace at which things are moving is a bit slow. For example, the AU passport, the AU currency, and all of that. Now, if these things have been on the drawing board for all these years, and today we are still, for example, ECO, there's, West African, it's been on the drawing board for more than 20 years now, and we are still struggling. So the question I want to ask is this. Could it be that we still have the Casablanca, Monrovia blocks undertone, even though we talk about united Africa, but could it be that these two blocks, the philosophical underpinnings of these two blocks are still, working behind the scenes?
Well, it's still there because I think we still feel that there's security concerns.
Right.
So if I'm coming to Ethiopia, I have to get a visa because we want to know what Joe is coming to do in Addis Ababa, because Joe might be a terrorist, right? And so therefore, we don't think we should do a common passport. Because if you have a common passport, there'll be no need for a visa, right? To me, I think it's wrong. I think it's totally wrong. I'm not saying that we shall, when you go to America, when you go to Europe, the Schengen area, 17 countries, you get one visa and you go everywhere. Do you think they are not concerned about security? Do you think they are not monitoring? So it's a question of intelligence. It's a question of intelligence sharing. So by the time I get here, in fact, our borders are so porous that if a terrorist wants to come into the country, he's not going to go through the airport. You know that. Yeah. So the question is then, why are we doing that? So let's have intelligence sharing. Let's have our security people have some level of sharing intelligence on our citizens. Again, we go through privacy concerns because some people will say you have data, you have too much information. But it can be worked out. But once we work it out, I think it's about time that Africans are able to move freely. If somebody in Ethiopia wants to go and live in Ghana, why do you want to stop the person? He's an African, right? So until we do these things, this is when people will then have faith in the African Union, that it knows that the African Union stands for something.
So, but Joe, you have been, by the way, if you have just joined us, this is the Religion and Enterprise Television, where we talk about the role of faith-based institutions in promoting SMEs on the continent. And we do so because of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the Agenda 2063. And basically what we are trying to do is that on this continent, you have almost 99% of the people who are religious. They are either in the mosque or they are in the church. So the question is, if people in Africa are religious and therefore they are either in the mosque or in the churches, the question is, what can we do to ensure that the leaders who have these people as captive audience can be brought to the fore for them to appreciate some of these things that we are talking about, so that using the information that they have, they can help promote small and medium scale enterprises on the continent for them to become sustainable and create more jobs. More so, as we've always said, in Africa, majority of the businesses are in the informal sector. And these informal sector entrepreneurs find themselves again either in the church or in the mosque. So it begs to answer the question, why are we leaving faith-based institutions out of the question or out of the discourse? And that is why this platform is about. And so we are talking to my good friend and brother, Dr. Joseph Attah-Mensah of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He's about exiting on retirement, and he gave a very, very illuminating lecture on the 24th of July, 2023. And it is a follow-up of that lecture because he made some very, very profound recommendations, which we shall get to very soon. But right now, we are trying to understand the genesis of integration on the continent and the challenges that have bedeviled the integration process and what can be done about them. And this is what we are doing. So, Joe, now the question, you've been with ECA for almost 20 years. You've seen it all. And as I mentioned in your listening to all these high-profile people talking about you and giving you all the praise, a lot of these things you've written about them, you were part of the process. My question to you is, Joe, from where you sit and from all the things that you have seen around, where are we getting it wrong as a continent? What is the problem of Africa?
Well, I think I would not put it that way as a problem of Africa.
But what has been the challenge?
I mean, everyone faces challenges, yes. And we are going through the phase of some challenges. Right. At the moment, we are facing the challenges of growth. We're facing the challenges of carrying a lot of debt. We're facing the challenges of the shocks from COVID, from the Ukraine war and the climate change. And all these requires addressing. But when you come to the integration front, where I have a bit of concern is, we have the African Continental Free Trade Area, but yet we are having challenges in terms of some countries agreeing to, bilateral trade with countries outside the continent. We are having challenges of the question of the partitioning or the way the EU Economic Partnership Agreement is, which is putting countries in different zones that undermine our regional integration agenda. Those are the things that we have to address. We also have the challenge of the secretariat that is supposed to prosecute our regional integration, which is the African Union Commission. It is at the source. Its funding is coming from, most of the funding for its programs are coming from outside. And you cannot have your integration programs being financed by partners. And I think it's ridiculous that African countries should begin to put some money, more money, if they want to be integrated. They should pay for it.
But Joe, I mean, when I ask the question, where is the challenge, where's the problem? You say you won't put it as a problem or challenge. Now, if we sit and design such a very profound program, and we know that the program cannot proceed without funding, and yet the funding is coming from outside, what are we doing? Is it not saying that, look, I know what I want, but I don't want to put money into it, and therefore he who pays the piper calls the tune? So is that not a challenge? Is that not a problem? Is it a political will, or what is it?
I mean, to tell you the truth, after 60 years of independence, if we cannot find money to finance our integration, that's a serious concern.
So
we designed a way to solve the problem,
Right.
in terms of funding.
Right.
And we came up with something called a levy, which is 0.2% on all imports coming outside the continent.
Right.
Ghana is implementing it, by the way.
Right.
Other countries, Rwanda and other countries, have implemented it. And that's 0.2% for imports coming from outside the continent is what could bring a lot of money to African countries. But some countries say no, they don't want that.
Why?
Well, they claim that what they want is that the AU should draw up its budget, tell them how much they owe, and they will send a check.
Okay.
But even that, they don't pay. They don't pay. So it is something that we have to look into it and ask ourselves the question.
Yes.
So how do we do? Because until we solve the question of the financing of the African Union, a lot of what I'm saying cannot happen.
And how do we solve it?
Is for African member states should pay. They should pay. Okay. And perhaps maybe they can streamline the secretariat, make it, small, but very efficient.
Which secretariat?
African Union's Commission is our secretariat, right? So that to me is what needs to be done. We need to do that. And until we do that, a lot of our integration programs may not go ahead, may not be fully implemented, because we always have to serve the interest of who is paying, because they can determine what they'll pay for, right? So that's something I think we have to finance. Yeah, So those are some of the things that I think, and I think countries should also be made to aware that, their question of strength, right, is more to do with being within the AU. Right. Otherwise, we will not get anywhere.
I mean, they're very, very interesting pillars within the discussion of the African continent. The air transport, the railways, and all of that. Where are we at the moment?
Well, the air transport, I mean, I must say that, air transport is very competitive and very challenging. And so we've come up, or the AU has come up with something known as the single air transport market, whereby they want to open up the market so that African airlines will be able to to apply freely. But this is not new. It's something known as the Yamoussoukro decision,
Yeah.
which 1999, which
Right.
was passed.
But I mean, look
But-
at it, 1999, we are in 2023.
Yeah.
I
So, but, you know, I mean, yeah, that's true. That is true. But that is where the challenges are. You know, how do we get to implement things that does not require money?
Because, Joe, let's take the AU passport, for example. I mean, out of 54 or 55 or 40, whatever nation, only 4 countries have ratified.
The free movement of persons.
Of persons.
Yeah. Yes, the protocol on free movement.
Exactly. Where does that lead us?
You know, the interesting part is that the protocol on free movement was done the same time that we had the protocol on the AFCFTA.
Right.
Countries signed, but it has not been ratified in their parliament.
Okay, Joe, for the average African listening to us, when you say signed and ratified, they may not understand. Break it down to the level of the average African. What is the signing and the ratification?
So we have a protocol comes out.
Absolutely.
We all agree on the protocol. Countries sign off that they support it. They are heads of states.
Right.
However, for it to go beyond and become law, it requires it requires 15 countries to ratify through their parliaments.
Right.
So ratification requires that countries would take the protocol to their parliaments for discussions and for ratification. And so I think my view is that the energy that was spent in terms of getting the AFCFTA, we need to find that energy again to be able to get the protocol done.
Where did the energy go?
I think, I think some of the issues that I raised, and I think some of the reasons that maybe the protocol didn't come up was because of the question of the northern countries, northern hemisphere, fearing that once the protocol is accepted and becomes law in Africa, a lot of the, the trekking on the Sahara and then dying in the high seas will stop because people can just fly instead of walking to maybe Morocco or to Libya or to Tunisia and find their way to Spain or wherever they want to go. But so we need to.
But if we create more jobs on the continent, would people want to fly?
I don't think so. Migration takes place within the continent more than outside the continent, right? In ECOWAS, you know, if you go to Ghana, there are Nigerians, all the ECOWAS people are there. You go to Nigeria, you find the ECOWAS people. You go to Gambia, you find the ECOWAS. So there's movement taking place, right? But it's just that we fear ourselves. That's what it is.
Joe, I mean, if you look, by the way, we are talking about the Africa continental integration of Africa, let me put it that way, and this is the Religion and Enterprise Television, and we are discussing the integration of our continent, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and the Agenda 2063. And I'm talking to my good friend and brother, Dr. Joseph Atta-Mensah of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And this is a follow-up of a seminar, very illuminating seminar that he delivered on the 24th of July under the theme, Is Africa Integrating or Disintegrating? And this is the discussion that is ensuing that particular seminar. Joe, my question is, and this is all these things that we are talking about have been on the drawing board for all these years. Now, during your presentation, you made some very, very, very interesting recommendations. And let me pick them one by one. And if you can address them as you did, that would be very, very. And I want to start the first one. I have your presentation here. I actually went and printed the whole presentation that you gave, which was very, 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 very interesting. And I'll start with the first the first recommendation that you made, you gave 11 recommendations, 11 of them. First one is accelerate the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. It's a trade by state parties of AFCTA who are also members of. What did you mean by this? Are we not trading amongst ourselves? Well, you said accelerate the implementation of the AFCTA, trade by state parties of AFCTA who are also members of the REC and the FTA must also be issued the AFC certificate.
Okay.
Right.
So basically,
Explain that to us.
Basically, what I was saying is that look, you have countries like ECOWAS, who is already a free trade area zone. Right. You have the economic EAC, East African Community, right, which is also a free trade area. You have the Southern Africa Development Community, right, which is also a FTA, and so on and so forth. Right. So the point is that,
and these are doing very well.
Right. So what we could have done, though I'm just saying, and it's not late, we can reset. Right. What I'm just saying is, look, you have the tripartite agreement. Right. The tripartite is made of 29 countries, of African countries. Right. It has 11 ratifications already. It's only left with 4 ratifications, which is 15 to make the tripartite agreement hold. So what we could have done was to have said, look, tripartite, let's get the energy to get the tripartite to go. Once we get the tripartite, 29 countries, they can trade amongst themselves. And we just sit down with them and say, look, 29 countries, if you're going to trade within that block, that zone, please, if you've ratified the CFTA, then when you trade, instead of asking for the FTA tripartite stamp, just put we can recognize both, right? So then what you do then is to say the 29 countries, let's go and make an offer to ECOWAS, 15 countries. 29 plus 15, we iron out the whatever agreement. What is most important in this sense is to look at your tariff lines and to look at what the tariff lines for the tripartite is, what the tariff lines for the CFTAs, and the discussion is about harmonization, right, about those lines. So 15 plus 29 would be what?
That's about
44. So if you're able to get that, right, you have 44 countries already done. Yeah. The next thing that we do is to then go to ECAS, 11 countries, right? So within a short time, see what I'm saying? You get what I'm getting at? Within a short time, the CFTA would have gone for the whole continent. Now we say the CFTA is not moving, so we're going to do something called guided trade with only 8 countries to test pilot the CFTA. Good, but I'm worried that if we are not careful, we'll say that is the that's what we are going to use for our CFTA. So I think for that reason, I think that we can go reset, in my humble opinion, and see how we could use the REX to be the launching pad to get our REX going. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, one of the questions that has been going through my mind, I mean, Joe, if you look at the continent, majority of SMEs are in the informal sector, largely controlled or led by women and young people. How do we get these informal SMEs to become actors in the African Continental Free Trade?
They are trading already, but they may not be doing formal trade.
Right.
There are a lot of traders who go to, in my country, Ghana, who travel to Togo all the time. So what you want to do is to formalize them. And by the way, if you're able to formalize them, you get some taxes also, tax revenue. So what we need to do, in my opinion, how do we make it conducive for them? One of the reasons how we could do it, one of the ways we could do it is to, register them, And then in terms of financing, right, access to credit and all that, a lot of the women travel with money on them, which is very risky. So what we could do is that we can get a bank in Ghana to have an alignment.
We already have them. I mean,
Right, with the-
EcoBank, ABSA,
EcoBank,
Stanbic,
all
all
this.
these are regional banks.
So what you could do is to come up with a way and to say that, look, if you are traveling to Togo to go and buy your goods, may I suggest to you that we have this facility called a bank. Go and leave your money there. And when you cross the border, you pick it up there. Right? So you get the central banks involved and there's a bit of a transaction. So they put their CFA or wherever they got their CFA, or even if it's CDs, they put it in the bank and then pick up the CFA when they get there.
Isn't the mobile money doing it?
I don't know. I have to investigate. I don't think so. I don't know a mobile money where.
You can do the conversion of the currencies. Yeah, that's another challenge.
But one of the ways we could do that is, the Afro-Exim Bank. The Afro-Exim Bank has a payment system platform. And that payment system platform allows traders to pay for their goods in the currency of their choice, of the domestic currency. So that's another way you can do it. You let them leave their money in a bank in Ghana, get a piece of paper, an IOU to be claimed when they get to the other side.
I'm laughing because, I mean, when is Afro-Exim Bank, a payment system, I mean, I'm asking myself, how many Africans are even aware of the Afro-Exim Bank, payment system? So we seem to be doing quite a lot on the continent, but the real people on the ground do not seem to understand these things.
But you see,
Emmanuel, that I also talk about all the time is that we seem to think, particularly the private sector, always seems to think that, there is this organization, the ECAs or the Afro-Exim banks and all that, would have to involve them in some of these discussions. But my point always to the private sector, you are the beneficiary of most of these things. So I would appeal to the private sector themselves. They should be convening such meetings and inviting, the ECAs, the African Union, to come and tell them, because they should be keen to do what the West does. It's the private sector that lobbies. It's the private sector that puts governments, put people into governments. So it's for them to gain. But they shouldn't always think that there is the ECA or somebody who will have to, because they always complain that they are not part of the discussions. That's not right. I think, yes, I agree that the private sector should be involved in all these discussions, but the private sector should also take the leadership.
Proactiveness.
Proactive.
Right.
Proactive.
Right.
That's the way.
Right.
To be proactive, and in calling on,
The partners or the institutions. Yeah. Yes. I am smiling because, you talk about, proactiveness and all that. It's same as our politics. We vote people into power, into members of parliament, and then it turns out to be that we look at them as, as a joke. I know we have to let you go, but I'm going to ask, you talk about the Airbus model.
yes.
Could you expatiate on that?
Okay, so what is Airbus? We all fly in Airbus all the time, right? And the Airbus is a French company to invest into this.
Right.
But everybody might be thinking that the Airbus gets all its parts from everything in France.
Right.
No. It has branches in 14 countries.
Interesting.
Right? 14 countries. And they bring whatever parts they do, they bring it to Tunis.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And then this is something in Tunis. So what I'm just saying is that for our integration purposes, if we're going to make, let's say for instance, chocolate, right? If we're going to have chocolate, what do we need for chocolate? We need cocoa. Ghana has it, right?
Right.
We need a lot of milk. Maybe Ghana has some. Trees like Wucha, Botswana, who invest more in cows and all that, who supplies with the milk. Sugar, we come from Mauritius. So we live that kind of setting. So we think about production in a way that is not only one country, which wants everything, but they do it in the sense that it's an agreement. We bring business people from different places of the continent to build that product.
Right.
And that is integration.
Right.
And that will be the goods that we need in order to sell.
So why do you think these are brilliant ideas? And I dare to say they may not be very novel. I'm sure people have thought about these things and all that. Why are we not? What is hindering us?
I don't know. Implemented. I think you see, at times I would say that we should be a little bit patient. Integration is a difficult thing.
Right.
It requires that people have to be comfortable. Right? So you continue. We should continue. In my time, maybe we've done the CFTA. Maybe in my children's time, they'll do something. And gradually,
We'll get there.
we'll get there.
All of us will hold the African Union passport.
Let's hope so. I hope it's in my lifetime. I hope it's in my lifetime.
So, Joe, I mean,
But
yes.
The other recommendation which I thought you would have to
Right.
say.
The AI. I was going to ask you about the AI anyway, but
The AI is very important. I can run through the recommendations quickly.
right.
The AI is important, that's artificial intelligence. It's now the order of the day. Let's not fear it. Let's embrace it.
Right.
Let's be bold. Let's look at what is wrong with it and maybe use it to carry out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a very, very important. The other thing in terms of supply chain. Right. We had challenges in terms of COVID. Prices went up, and we'll continue to hold that in supply chain.
But we're not doing it.
We should build our own supply chains.
Right.
I said that, and it has infrastructure, it has security, it has logistics. So we have to move that goods from Ethiopia could go to any part, vice versa, with other countries. So we have to build that infrastructure. We have to share intelligence. We have to use technology, again, AI, to pioneer that. Regional value chains. What we do is that we do not, and I'm talking about the recommendation.
Sure.
So regional value chains we have to build. We just don't want to export only cocoa. We want to export chocolate. We shouldn't be exporting bauxite. We should add value to it to turn it into
Chocolate.
or whatever.
Yeah. Sure.
We should add value to our diet. So those things are important that we have to do. And the other thing which I think is important, which I raise, is that we have to finance our African Union.
Right.
We cannot continue to depend on outsiders to pay. We need to make sure that it's adequately financed. And then the other thing which I also don't like is, I think, that this idea of dividing us.
Yeah. Sub-Sahara. They say.
For me, it's like us in Idris said, Sahara should not be seen as a partition.
Absolutely.
Right? It's just a bridge.
Right.
If you see the Sahara as a bridge that brings the southern part of our continent and the northern part together. So since we are doing this in
Addis,
we are doing this.
Sure. Yeah. No, but before you go there, Joe, I mean, before you go there, having said all that you have said, the question I'm asking to you, which I want you to answer, is: do you think Africa is integrating or disintegrating, or are we integrating but at a very slow pace?
I think I need the answer to you. that is very relevant. That I have said whatever I needed to say. And so I think I've answered the question in all aspects of I've answered the question in a way that
Yeah.
But before we go, I want to read you a poem.
Sure.
And this poem was read by Mama.
Okay.
And this is for Ethiopia.
Right.
For our people. And it was a time which I told you that Ethiopia inspired us.
Yes.
And this is the Ethiopia shall rise. Ethiopia, Africa's bright gem, set high among the tender peers, that gave birth to the unfailing waters of the Nile. Ethiopia shall rise. Ethiopia, land of the wise. Ethiopia, bold cradle of Africa's ancient rule and fertile school of our African culture. Ethiopia the wise shall rise and remold with us the full figure of our African souls and destiny.
Interesting. I see.
25th of May.
Interesting.
So I can end by saying, appealing to Bembala, Ahmed Bembala, the first president of Nigeria,
Right.
who says, let us die a little or die completely.
Interesting. Well, if you have just joined us, this is the Religion and Enterprise Television. And we have been talking to my very good friend and brother, Dr. Joseph Atta-Mensah of the Economic Commission for Africa, discussing the integration of our continent. And the question we've been trying to answer is Africa indeed integrating or disintegrating? And I think that, like you mentioned, following the discussion, we'll leave you to give your own answer as to whether we are integrating or disintegrating, or integrating but at a very low pace. But like he said, let's be patient. Let's follow the process and believe that yes, things are going to go the way we want it to go. Let me give you the last comment, the last opportunity to make your final comment to the African continental, to the whole continent. There are a lot of SMEs, a lot of young people, women who are in the informal sector, and what they are trying to do is they are working hard to ensure that we can open the borders for them to do business, anywhere they want to do it. So, what's your final comment to this?
My final thoughts to us is let's ratify the people of Union. Let's abolish visas for Africans traveling in the country. We have to move freely. Let's do our best to formalize the informal sector to make sure that all these women who are involved in informal trade, the risk they face are minimized. Let's find a way to empower women, give them access to credit. Most women want to be titans of industry. Yes, we should continue to work on violence against women. We should continue to work on female genital mutilation. We should do all those things, but on top of that, economic empowerment for women is key for our development. So I would end by saying that we can all do this, but being united. If we are united, we'll be able to achieve the African goal.
My appeal to you, if you have really enjoyed this program, please share the link and also subscribe to the channel so that you can receive subsequent episodes that are coming on this same channel. This has been the Religion and Enterprise Television. My name is Emmanuel Dei-Tumi, and it's been a pleasure coming your way. We'll come and see you again in the coming days. Thank you for watching. Africa needs you.